Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we are just past the trade deadline in 2025. Honestly, our 2025 season is going pretty similarly to our 2024 season. We've had a really solid pitching staff, particularly our starting rotation. We rank third or no, I guess fourth now in the American League in runs against. But our offense, once again, is pretty dreadful, ranking 13th in the American League in runs scored. We did just make a couple of trades before the trade deadline. Didn't have to give up anyone who was likely to be a member of our team 2 or 3 years from now, which is really when we're hoping to finally be a bit more competitive. And we rented Bo Bichette, although we put him right onto the IL. He is absolutely a rental because he's looking for $24 million a year for 5 years, not a number that we have any chance of being able to pay him. Similarly, we also rented Tyler O'Neill to hopefully boost our offense against left-handed pitching, and he too is a pure rental given that he's looking for 7 years at over $19 million a year, and neither of those deals is going to be close to working for our Oakland A's. And although we're 16 games out in the division behind the Rangers, who are one of the top teams in baseball this year, we are still lurking 4 games outside of the wild card spot on the periphery of the wild card race. But given that we didn't need to give up too much for O'Neill and Bichette, felt that it made sense to at least try to keep this team competitive over the last couple months of the season. I don't suspect that when all is said and done that we're going to be a wild card team. I don't suspect when all is said and done that we're going to be a 500 team this year. But I think we probably can get pretty close to the 77 wins we had a year ago when we made a 27-game improvement from 2023 and admittedly got pretty lucky in terms of the one-loss record on the field. And we're off to a bit of a rough start in the month of August, a 3-6 record. We've lost 4 in a row at this point. So after that great month of July, definitely feel like the team is coming back to earth. Good news, Bo Bichette is healthy. We're actually going to put him on a rehab assignment for a few days because we probably are most likely to play him at second base, and it's not a position he apparently has any experience with right now. But we have been mixing and matching at second base all year between Hernandez, Gauthier, Oswaldo Cabrera, and no one doing particularly well. Although Nick Ahmed is certainly not a long-term answer for us at shortstop, he is pretty solid defensively despite his offensive limitations. So in an effort to tighten up our defense while also getting Bichette's bat into the lineup, we're going to hopefully have him work out the kinks for a few days and get a little bit competent at playing second base before we put him right into the fire at the major league level. If you're wondering about the standings with our recent swoon, we're now 5.5 out for the wild card, so certainly you could argue we don't have the time to play around with Bichette and have him on this minor league rehab assignment, but I really don't think we're that serious of a contender anyways, but I do think we'll be better off if Bichette is not totally learning how to play the position at the major league level, so not going to wait until he's fully trained up at the position, but hopefully those first several games, he'll make some progress, and then we'll bring him up and let him learn the second half of playing second baseman at the major league level. And a little bit of a better week, 3-2 record. We took 2 games against the Dodgers somehow before losing 2 out of 3 on the road at the Angels. As we sit here on August 18th, we are now still 5.5 behind in the race for that final wild card spot. Taking a look at what Bichette has done over the past week, and he's played in 6 games, 5 starts, and you can see he's still not completely proficient at second base, but he did make some decent progress over that first week. Given that we really need his bat more than anything, we are going to bring him up and let him do the rest of the learning at the major league level. And to make room for Bichette, we temporarily sent Darryl Hernandez back down to AAA. He had a rough rookie year thus far, hitting .217 with only a .281 on-base percentage, 64 WRC plus, below replacement level. We're having him play left field down there just to give him a little more versatility, although I don't think he really has the bat of a left fielder. You may have also noticed, if you're looking closely, that Cameron Cawley, who we picked up in the trade with Texas right when the season was getting underway, is playing center field down there now. We've got him pretty well trained up at this point, so he can play second, third, or short. But his outfield ratings are actually pretty decent, and I think as a center fielder in a pinch could certainly do a lot worse defensively than Cameron Cawley. Question with him is just how much his bat is going to develop. He is producing a lot better in AAA than he was in AA, so glad that we made that promotion, hitting .287 with a 115 WRC plus in AAA for us this year. He will certainly be in the mix to be a September call-up. I think it may end up being a numbers game. Presumably we'll be bringing back Hernandez, Tyler Soderstrom, so no guarantees that Cawley will make his major league debut this September, but still think that with the glove that he has, he could be a pretty useful player for us for the next several seasons. It's just a matter of ensuring that we develop that bat as much as possible. Possibly it might be something we'll consider working on in the development lab this upcoming off-season. And unfortunately for us, the first week with Bo Bichette in the lineup went about as badly as you could expect. We lost all 6 games this week, extending our losing streak to 7 games. And in those 7 games, we have been pretty brutal, scoring a total of just 8 runs across those 7 games, the last 6 of which included Bichette in the lineup. Standings-wise, we're still ahead of the Astros in the division. Ruiz, despite his injury issues, is now tied for the league lead in stolen bases. But clearly with 7 wins in a row, we are plunging in the wild card standings, and we are now 10.5 behind the Orioles and the Mariners for those final 2 wild card spots in the American League. And it's not completely hopeless at this point, but it's getting pretty close. And after that month of July that had us feeling optimistic about the team, the month of August was brutal. We did end up losing 8 in a row before we somehow won 2 against the Rangers, but since then have been swept in a 4-game series in Minnesota. So as we reach September roster expansion, pretty rough situation for Oakland. We're only a game and a half ahead of the Astros to remain out of the basement. And we are 11 games out of the wild card spot with a lot of teams that we need to jump over. So not feeling great about how the team is playing, obviously, but feeling better that we didn't go crazy before the trade deadline, didn't give up anyone who's in our long-term plans. We've slipped back with this brutal 8-19 month of August, by far our worst month of the season, to last in the American League in runs scored. Still have a solid pitching staff, 5th in the AL in runs allowed. The defense is still respectable. We're still pretty good on the base paths, but at 58 and 73, we're right in line with our Pythagorean record expectations. So we're a mediocre to bad baseball team, and that's the way that we are showing up on the field. And before we make our September call-ups, we'll check in on early results from our two new additions. Bo Bichette hitting just 234 for us, one homer in 47 at-bats, 62 WRC plus. He's been below replacement level, is slowly learning how to play second base. We'll make him even more valuable for whoever ends up picking him up in free agency this offseason, but hasn't been the massive boost to the lineup that we were hoping. Tyler O'Neill has been better, 325 average, 2 homers and 8 ribbies and 40 at-bats. He is playing primarily against left-handed pitching and has put up a 164 WRC plus for us. Against righties, though, he's really, despite his track record and despite the fact that he's going to be looking for some huge money this offseason, really not better than the guys we currently have in those kind of corner outfield, first base, DH slots against righties. So we're going to continue using him a bit strategically and trying to maximize the returns we get from him, but not tempted at this point to put him in the lineup against right-handed pitching over the likes of Meadows and Conforto and even Noda, who despite his limitations, does hit some homers and draw a lot of walks and has still been above average offensive player this year. And we made our 3 September call-ups. Luis Heel, who we had sent down after he was not actually spent the whole year in the IL. I wish I could speak properly today. He spent the whole year in the minors. We picked him up on waivers from Yankees at the beginning of the 2024 season, spent the whole year with us, but did have minor league options. He hasn't been incredible as our closer in AAA, but at 27 years old, we kind of got to figure out what, if anything, we want to do with him for the long term. So Heel back up with the major league team, and then 3 guys making their returns: Tyler Soderstrom, Daryl Hernandez, and Lawrence Butler, all of whom who have spent some time with us this year, back on the major league team. And we've actually put all 3 back into the starting lineup. We're not going to, at 58 and 73, have some incredible month of September that's going to get us to the wild card. So we are actually going to ensure that we see as much of the youngsters as possible, which meant that we've actually taken Ryan Noda out of the starting lineup against righties as our first baseman, put Soderstrom in there. We've actually taken Michael Conforto out of the starting lineup and put Lawrence Butler in there. And we put Hernandez into the starting lineup against righties for the veteran Nick Ahmed. And we've actually pivoted Bichette back to shortstop. So 3 guys who may not have long-term futures with us are now sitting on the bench, even though arguably they may be a bit better today than the guys who are replacing them, because we want to ensure that the younger players who could be part of what we're trying to build here in Oakland get as many at-bats and as much playing time as possible here in September. So we'll have the best sense of who they actually are when we've got to start making some difficult decisions this off-season and beyond. And the first week of September has fortunately went better for us than most of August did. We lost another 2 games to begin the month to drop the streak to 6 losses in a row, but since then we've won 5 in a row. So a 5-2 start for the month, 63 and 75. So at the very least, we've clinched that we won't have a 100 loss season this year. Got the Yankees in Texas at home coming up this week, and the season is going to go well into the beginning of October before the playoffs begin. Did just make one move. We had to bring Michael Tonkin back from a rehab assignment in AAA. Finally ran out of time there. He wasn't particularly good for us, but probably won't be part of our team next year. But to make room for him on the roster, we have designated for assignment, a guy who definitely won't be on our team next year. Taylor Rogers, had higher expectations for him when we picked him up in a trade with San Francisco right before the trade deadline a year ago. Was not good for us last year, and he really wasn't good for us this year. He's a 34-year-old guy whose velocity has really dropped pretty significantly from the mid-90s to barely being able to touch 90 over the year and a half that he's been with us. He's looking for almost $2 million a year next year as a guy who's going to be 35 shortly. Not a big part of our future. As I said, I don't really think Tonkin is either, but we know that Rogers won't be. And we took 2 out of 3 against the Yankees, so that was positive. But some negative news here on a guy that we probably spent more time talking about in the first 11 episodes of this series than any other player, despite the fact he hasn't played all that much for us, particularly this year. And that, of course, is Mason Miller, a setback in his potential recovery from a ruptured UCL. Going to now be another 10 months until he is ready to play. So we were hoping to have him back towards the end of spring training next year. I have been off and on this season in the last few episodes exploring potential trade options for him. He still had, before this latest setback, a bit of value. When we get to the off season and we can trade players again, it's something we'll explore more, given that he's going to miss all of next year and he's no longer making the major league minimum, or he will no longer be making the major league minimum, most likely. He's off of the 40-man roster since he's on the 60-day IL. But I think, given that he's also 27 years old and he's probably going to be 28 before he pitches another meaningful game in the major leagues, if we can get anything of value for Mr. Miller this offseason, might be time for us to think about moving on from him, because he's going to be, if he comes back and if he is close to what he was, he's going to be making pretty big money by the time I think this team is ready to truly compete. So it might just make sense to continue bolstering our farm system by getting what we can from him at this point, since it looks like he's essentially going to have missed 2 complete seasons in a row when all is said and done. I mean, I guess in theory, he'll be back maybe mid-July to begin a rehab assignment next year, and maybe we could have him pitching in the majors by mid-August, but that's assuming no more setbacks. That's assuming he's still what we think he is and what we know he was. And even if he, pitches 10 games for us in August and September of next year, I'd still consider that basically 2 lost seasons in a row, since we certainly can't count on him when we're planning out our roster for spring training and the start of the 2026 season. And we also ended up taking 2 out of 3 against the Rangers, so clearly too little too late, but I'd rather have the team be borderline respectable than truly awful. And at 67 and 77, that's where we kind of are at this point. 18 and a half behind in the division, but looks like we should at least be able to beat the Astros when all is said and done. We're only 4.5 out of that last wild card spot, with that 8-2 record over our last 10. So we've made up a lot of ground. I think we're probably going to run out of games. 3 at Baltimore and 3 at Tampa Bay this week, and hopefully we'll still be alive when we head into these last couple of weeks of the season, the last week and a half or so of September and then into early October. And unfortunately, this last week was only 500. We took 2 out of 3 against the mighty Orioles, but then lost 2 out of 3 at Tampa. So as we sit here on Monday, September 22nd, we're still 4.5 behind the last wild card spot. The Mariners with a losing record, just edging the Angels, Twins, Yankees, and then the Red Sox and us for that final spot. It's 70 and 80. We're going to need to be almost perfect. We probably need to be 12 and 0 to get it, but given that it's and I don't know if 12 and 0 even guarantees that we get there. But clearly we need to be pretty close to perfect over these last 2 weeks of the season to have any chance of sneaking in with a wild card. And we're still technically alive for the playoffs, but we didn't do much over this past week. We took 2 out of 3 at home against the Angels, but then lost 2 out of 3 at home against Minnesota. Those are 2 teams that we are battling with for this final wild card spot, so to just go 500 certainly doesn't help us. Seattle is a great game for us to have on tap in the next series, and then the Angels after that. Divisional games, 6 of them all on the road, but they're 2 teams that we are still battling with here. You can see Seattle's magic number is 6. We're 6.5 back, but we still haven't technically been eliminated. I guess that's because they've got a game in hand on us. So presumably we need a lot of help at this point. We've got to go 6 and 0. We need to take our 3 against Seattle and then have them lose their other 4 games. And then we also need the Angels to lose some of the 3 games that they'll be playing on top of the sweep that we need to get against them as well. So our backs are certainly against the wall, and just to make things a little bit trickier for us, Mr. Bichette is going to be out with an oblique strain for the final week of the season. So he ended up hitting .255, 8 doubles, 4 homers, 14 ribbies, and 145 at-bats in Oakland. Stole 5 bases for us, but an 80 WRC plus. He was barely above replacement level. Clearly, we're hoping with his contact ability that he would have given our offense a bit of a boost and kind of been a consistent performer that was better than major league average in terms of his offensive production. And unfortunately, we did not even get that from him in his very abbreviated tenure with the Oakland Athletics. And file this one under too little, too late as well, but Anthony Santander just became the first player of the week for the Oakland A's through this playthrough. He's had a pretty solid first year for us. He was our big free agent signing from a year ago. We gave him that front-loaded contract since we had money to spend, so he should be in the mix to be on our roster for the next few years. .260 average, 38 homers, 112 ribbies, 125 WRC plus, a WAR of close to 3 at this point. He is clearly our most effective offensive player. The issue is we don't have a lot of other players who are even providing league average production. And as we head into the final week of the season, Seattle did lose their game that they had in hand on us, but we still need to be perfect down the stretch just to be able to tie Seattle for the final wild card spot, and that's assuming that none of these other teams get up over 79 wins, which is certainly possible. So we are still alive as this final week of the season begins. I don't think we're going to go 6 and 0. Remember, we were 77 and 85 a year ago, so if we do go 4 and 2 down the stretch, we can match what this team did a year ago in Oakland. Taking a look at our team statistics, we're 1 game below Pythagorean expectations, and Team's been a bit schizophrenic here in the second half of the year. We were great in July. We were brutally horrible in August, and we've actually been pretty solid in September with that 15-10 record. Have improved to 13th in the league in runs scored, and we are still 5th in the league in runs allowed. And we lost our first game against Seattle before winning the second, which was meaningless at that point because we have now been eliminated from the playoffs. But sadly, being eliminated from the playoffs is not the worst thing that has happened to us over the last 2 games. Mitch Spence, young right-handed pitcher, the captain personality that we've had on our squad for the last 2 years, and a pretty respectable pitcher, 10-13 this year with a 3.99 ERA, 3.1 WAR for us as he made some progress even from his solid rookie year. Tore his UCL in his last start. He is going to miss all of next season. So with Spence joining Miller on the long-term IL, this pitching staff that has been our strength over the first 2 years of this playthrough is now definitely disrupted because 2 of the guys that are younger pitchers on our staff that we could conceivably have been considering building around are most likely to miss all or most of next year. And it ended up being a pretty mediocre finish to a more than mediocre season for the Oakland A's. Lost 2 out of 3 at Seattle, lost 2 out of 3 at the Angels. So we finish up at 75-87, so we are actually 2 games worse than the 77 wins that we had a year ago. Definitely not feeling great about the situation we're dealing with in terms of our injuries to the pitching staff, but I do take some solace in that although we went from 77 wins a year ago to 75 this year, Pythagorean record-wise, we're 10 games better this year. We were a 66-win Pythagorean team a year ago that got really lucky. This year we were a 76-win Pythagorean team that kind of did about exactly what we were expected to do. Ended up tied for 13th in the AL in runs scored, so I guess that's a very small amount of progress from where we were a year ago when we were last. We did focus a bit on on-base percentage this offseason, and we improved from last to 10th, although that 314 figure is still not great. Second in the league in steals, second in base running, third in defensive efficiency, and fourth in zone rating. So those things are all positive and better than they were a year ago. And we finished 5th in the league in runs allowed. So the pitching on paper is solid, but as I noted, 2 pretty important pitchers for us are going to be injured most or all of next season. And we're also in a situation where a fair amount of the good pitchers that we had on our team this year are potential free agents or potential guys who are due to be making some decent money in arbitration. So we are going to have a lot of interesting decisions to make this offseason. You can see some of the summary statistics here, but we'll do a full dive on everyone who's on our major league team in our next episode as we start planning out for the offseason. And we'll also sim through the playoffs while we're doing that and then find out exactly where we stand in terms of our finances and our owner goals for next year. Looking at the owner goals, we were supposed to not suck completely this year, and at 75-87, looks like Mr. Fisher is reasonably pleased with what we did on that front. The other goal for this season was to find a top 20 prospect. Duncan Marston does not qualify as that at this point, unfortunately for us. So probably haven't made as much progress as we need to. Certainly don't think we're going to be let go from our position. Player development wise, we have made a bit of progress. We rank 17th overall in terms of our minor league system. This was one of the worst systems in all of baseball when we took it over 2 seasons ago. So we've made a little bit of progress through the 2 drafts and the 1 international amateur free agent period that we did have. The older international amateur free agent that we signed last year, of the 4 we ended up signing actually this year, ended up having a good year for us in rookie ball. Luis Pera, 1-3 with 21 saves and a 1.67 ERA, is the closer for our DSL team. Is a 19-year-old. So solid work by him. We'll be talking more about the likes of Duncan Marston and Cameron Cawley when we do a deeper review of our farm system in the upcoming episodes. Marston, I guess we'll talk about him now because it was the tale of 2 levels for the now 20-year-old. He was pretty dominant in his first foray in professional ball and rookie ball at the start of this year, but he definitely struggled pretty significantly when we promoted him to A ball. So still a lot of work to do with Mr. Marston. We may get him into the development lab over the winter to work on that control, because that's something that we're certainly going to need to see some progress on if we are going to get the dividends that we expect from him as a former 4th overall pick in 2024. So when all was said and done, it was really kind of the season I was expecting here. We had a better team, although we performed a bit worse on the field. At 75-87, though, wasn't a disaster. Ended up 7 behind the Mariners, who at 82-80 did end up clinching that final wild card spot in the American League. Ruiz did lead the league in steals for a 2nd consecutive season, although the number is down to 48. He did miss some time with injuries this year, but he ended up playing more than a year ago, and we had actually cranked his settings up to where we thought he'd be stealing a bit more aggressively this year. He did not run as much, but 48 steals with just 4 caught stealings was very efficient, and that's probably about the best thing we're going to be able to say about many of our players when we do our annual review in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.